Hello my friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. As I promised, I would be recording another podcast interview style video. Today I have with me my friend KRATOS, and he is one of my I guess one of my friends that originally I met at the gym. Is that where we met?
Yeah.
I think so. So anyways, we're going to talk, as you saw from the title, about relationships, specifically monogamy, polyamory, and polygamy. And I think this video is going to be, or this conversation is perfect to talk about with KRATOS because he has kind of a similar background to me in terms of belief systems and things like that. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your story and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up very pious, a household LDS Mormon. For a lot of people in Utah, very familiar with that. So very conservative. Wasn't really until, I suppose all growing up, my belief systems have changed, and definitely respectful of anybody else's belief system, but I kind of always struggled with different marginalized groups that religion tends to affect, and some of the beliefs, and I kind of just struggled with intelligent design in general. Yeah, so did grow up very pious, and then I kind of after college, out on my own, just kind of spread my wings, developed my own belief system. So I would identify as religiously atheist at this point, so an
Right.
atheistic existentialist. But it's a little bit about me. Grew up in the Pacific Northwest, been out here a while. Really like the outdoors here. So
Nice. I love that. Yeah, and I think that having conversations with KRATOS, I've had obviously multiple conversations throughout knowing him and things like that, and I love to hear from different people's perspectives because everyone has such an amazing perspective on life, and I think the more open-minded that you can be, the more that you're going to be able to grow, and we can evolve as a species. So what I ask for all of you guys listening is just to have an open mind. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with what he says or what I say or whatever, but just use this as a way to open your mind, broaden your perspective, and hopefully you can get something from this video. So anyways, let's get started by talking about, I guess we can even just start with the topic of monogamy. That's obviously something that most people are familiar with, and in my knowledge, monogamy is basically when you choose to have one partner. So, and it can be, as far as the partnerships go, I'm not really sure if, does this include like the homosexual community as well? Like that includes like gays, lesbians, as well as straight people?
Yeah,
That's still
there's
considered
definitely
monogamy, right?
monogamous couples in those communities, in the LGBTQ plus.
Right.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about your experience, like maybe even with past relationships, and maybe even your thoughts on monogamy?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, so all these different relationship dynamics it's totally personal. I would almost equate it to sexuality in a sense. It's, it's your choice. It's what works best for you. If you want to try or venture out and do different things or evolve your relationship, it's all about communication, consent with the partners involved. But monogamy is definitely the most traditional one. It has been for thousands of years, going back to some of the kings and biblical times that kind of helped institute that or reinforce that. But yeah, and so most of my relationships originally were monogamous, and there's definitely benefits to that as well. Once again, everybody's different,
Right.
and definitely it's all about what you feel the most comfortable with, what brings you the most joy, and also with your partner or the person you're involved with, what brings them joy as well. And for some people, monogamy is the only way. However, I would say just because it is so traditional, that dynamic, that is what our whole society reinforces in your mind. So opening your mind beyond that, even if you don't do anything besides monogamy, and just saying, oh, okay, I can respect where someone's coming from on that.
Exactly.
Is maybe the purpose of part of this discussion, which I think is great. But yeah, there's a lot of things, even movies as a little kid, everything, me kind of growing up as like a little sappy, it was a little embarrassing, emo boy, where it's just like, hey, like I want to find the one, and just that's what's so reinforced in your mind, and it's like that's the only person I'm going to be with for the rest of my life. Which, once again, if that's what's best for you, that's great. That's a beautiful thing. But there are other dynamics out there as well. But my background, that was a long answer.
No, that was good. That was really good.
Is definitely more traditional. And so in the beginning, when I was exploring or expanding my mind, there were, and if people go through this, they can probably relate, it took a while to kind of overcome and realize that we do have like that implicit bias that, relationships are only supposed to be this way. So unpacking that, and then being respectful of other people and broadening my mind on definitions for relationship dynamics took a little while. So
okay. Thank you for answering that. That was I feel like that was very insightful. And for me, very similar to you, in my past relationships were also very traditional in terms of, being in this monogamous relationship where, there's one partner, you're choosing each other. But like KRATOS said, it's very true that you really do want to do what's going to bring you the most happiness and fulfillment. But like with anything in life, I feel like if you challenge yourself and even just challenge your belief systems, maybe you find yourself being in other dynamics or other situations that you might actually find enjoyable. And even if you end up, for example, going back to a monogamous type of relationship, I still think that allows you to, once again, like unpack and break down those old structures and maybe even judgments that we would have on other people who choose to either believe differently than we do or live a life that doesn't look the same as ours. So I think that the benefit to people just questioning things is that we can break down the whole judgment of, how other people should live or shouldn't live. And that's just going to allow more love and compassion to come into our society. And more people are going to be happy and feel less judged by the choices that they make in terms of relationship dynamics. Because I don't think that it should be that we only live in a way that society pushes that we live. Whether it be like, obviously society wants us to kind of follow this belief system in terms of like most people need to be religious, or like kind of pushes you have to believe in God or you have to believe in this thing. And it doesn't mean that that's wrong by any means, but once again, it's like, where's the room for growth? Where's the room for individuality? Where's the room for uniqueness and just newness? And I think when it comes to evolving and growing and making room for that, we have to open our mind to things that we may have previously judged as wrong or bad.
Yeah.
That's kind of an interesting one. But do you want to touch on, or maybe kind of tie in a little bit more of the polyamorous type of relationship? Kind of explain that to people and tell them kind of what that is?
Yeah, so polyamory is kind of a broad term where you have more than one partner in a relationship dynamic. It's not gender specific, so it could be, men having multiple male partners or female partners, females having multiple female partners or male partners, because once again, people are in terms of relationships and sexuality, a lot of times in my own personal view and belief system on a spectrum. And so that opens that up to where essentially you have just more than one partner. So not the traditional monogamy, and poly, coming from Greek, meaning many, so just
Right.
more than one partner. And so that's kind of the broader term or definition, and then there's all sorts of like sub-classifications. So especially in our culture, we love to classify and label everything. So it's just naturally, especially like as humans, what we do. And so there's a lot of other like subtitles within polyamory. So they have the most common one I would say is called ethical polyamory or non-monogamy, which basically means you're being open and honest with everyone involved in the relationships, but you have more than one partner. So and the way that works, I kind of explain it too as like friendships, right? So you may, if for me or other people in that community, it's like, hey, I wouldn't expect you to have one friend your whole life. You may have one friend who's like a girl who's amazing, like in the gym, like you, who pushes you, and you're like, I want to hang out with that person as a friend. But I also have this other friend who's really into video games that I like. I want to hang out with that friend. And that's kind of at a broader level what polyamory is. So you have relationships and different people who bring different things to the relationship. Now, when I first bring this up to people who are new to it out here, especially if I'm talking to like male friends, they're like, oh, this sounds awesome. I'm like, wait, it's still a relationship. So you still have to be open, honest, communicate. I would actually say the communication and consent in those scenarios, in those communities, is much more evolved from what I've seen and this is just anecdotal evidence for me and my experience than in monogamous relationships.
Right.
So they're really good about communicating, hey, I'm going to go see this person. Are you okay? Like checking in with each other. So that's all, like any relationship, having good communication and valuing or validating other people's feelings is a big part of it. And and there's still a lot of struggles too. So it's like one relationship can be a struggle, so many can be quite a struggle as well. But initially sometimes when I tell people, they're like, oh, that sounds great, and I was like, well, that means your partner can also should be open to that as well. It's not just you. We're not going to like polygamy or something like that. It's open for both of you. So most people in that community, both people might have a primary partner. They might be nested with someone, living with someone. These are like some of the other classifications. Or a definition in Utah, I see a lot. People are just kind of open. So they have relationships, but they're maybe in a committed relationship with someone, but they also see and date other people, which is polyamory as well, because they're having those additional relationships. So there's hierarchical polyamory, so that's where you have like a main partner, and they are the main person that essentially comes first, which is an interesting dynamic, but a lot of people just kind of like to keep it non-hierarchical, so everybody's kind of seen as like equal but different.
Right.
So there's all sorts of different dynamics within polyamory. So
that's really cool. I want to kind of bring in the subject of polygamy here, because I can see how this very much so is similar but so different than polygamy, because obviously with polygamy and with polyamory we have multiple partners or multiple people involved. But I can see how, at least with my own experience of polygamy, because for any of you guys who don't know, my past, I grew up in a polygamous religion or belief system where personally my dad didn't have more than one wife, but everyone within the community that I was a part of had, most of them anyways, had more than one wife. And with polygamy, there's one man and multiple women. And the issue that arose for me in that type of belief system and dynamic was I felt like there wasn't a whole lot of equality. And I felt when, the man was taking on another wife, it was like this expectation of women just need to learn how to manage their jealousy, or they need to learn how to work within a family unit and be able to, share a space, learn how to communicate amongst each other. And, I felt like a lot of these ways that women were expected to be, it wasn't the same for men. And I felt like, how would a man feel if, his women were then allowed to go and have another partner with someone, go sleep around or be intimate with someone else? And I could see that a lot of the men weren't okay with that. And with, my own thought processes and how I would introspect and think about these things, I was like, that just doesn't sound like fairness. It doesn't sound like equality. But it also is this situation where I'm like, maybe that's also stunting the man's growth, and the woman's growth, because if we really want to have this place of mutual love and respect, then we need to have this understanding that, at least in my view, that both parties need to kind of understand from both perspectives. Like, for example, if he's going through a rough time in my life or in his life, and I'm like, well, you just deal with that. That's just something that men just have to go through. Like, I feel like that's such a separated, like, you versus me type of energy versus having compassion. Like, I wonder how it would feel if I put myself in your shoes. And that was something that really was, I guess, challenging for me to see, was that I felt like a lot of women would struggle in these types of dynamics in polygamy. And the men, of course, they're like on board for it. I mean, what type of guy is going to be like, oh shoot, gotta get another wife. Oh, dang it,
Another young wife.
I know, another young wife, shit. Like, I mean, it sounds like in that situation it's benefiting, or it seems to be benefiting the man more than the woman.
Absolutely.
And so it was kind of like just this offset of like, this doesn't seem right. So I'm very much more open to even the idea of polyamory, even though I've never practiced that in my own life. I think that allows for more growth for both parties, because like you said, there's challenges that come up in a relationship in general, and when it comes to communicating with your partner, being vulnerable, allowing yourself to show your insecurities, and just sharing experiences with the partner. So when you are opening yourself up to multiple people, now you're bringing in like other people's vulnerability, other people's energy, and other people's insecurities. So I can see how that would, if anything, be more challenging.
Yeah, it's definitely not without challenges, but to hit on your point you made, sharing some of your experiences with polygamy, it's definitely much more in favor of wealthy older men having young multiple partners, so it's much more of in relationships, and I know you and I have talked about this, I kind of like to put it on a scale too, because I like spectrums and scales. Right. But I always feel like in any relationship, whether it's polyamory, monogamy, if you find one person is trying to be more controlling, so on one side you have control, one side you have commitment, if it's always someone controlling everything and not promoting the other people's independence, which in polygamy they're not promoting the women's independence, it's all about the man.
Exactly.
In polyamory, it's equal. There's actually a lot of people in that community that I know in New York are feminists, and they're very into that community, and that dynamic works for them. But it's because with their partners, it's healthier because it's more about, well, I'm committed to you in different ways, but I'm not going to control you. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things I've found. So initially it was really it was a struggle or difficult to overcome jealousy, which is natural, especially with all those biases I had in my head of just being traditional and monogamous. But after you kind of unpack that, and some people can do this, some people cannot. That's where, you know, monogamy is for some people, polyamory is for some people, it's whatever is best for you. But once I got past jealousy, and I realized, and I try to do this with any dynamic, whether it's friendship, romantic, intimate involvement, I can be happy for someone in their scenario. So I can be essentially like a cheerleader for joy for someone. So if we were to say, like, hypothetically, if we were together and you were like, hey, I'm gonna go see Dave, who is like this awesome, handsome, like gym guy, shredded, and we connect on great levels, and we were in a polyamorous relationship, and I knew that brought you joy, that would make me happy. I would be like, that's great, you know, I hope you have a great time. Do you need anything from me for our connection before you go? I would want to, you know, make sure I check in with you and how you're feeling, but I would also be happy for you. I would just let go of my own insecurities, which I still struggle with sometimes, but what helps me get over it is really focusing on, you know, I can be happy for this person. I don't want to control their happiness and limit that. I want it to be infinite. And so if you say, hey, I'm going to go do something, I'm going to cheer for your independence, whether that's another relationship with someone, whether that's, hey, you know, I want to go into this career, I want to go. So a lot of these lessons I've learned from just this sort of community and relationship dynamics have really, in my situation, helped me out in other aspects of life, because I'm just happy for people. I have less envy, less jealousy, and I'm just like, oh, you know, instead of when somebody's like, I got a promotion or I did this, I'm not like, oh, I wish I got that, I should have got that. Or I had a lot of friends growing up when we were guy friends, and they would look at couples and they would see, like, you know, like a average looking guy with like this gorgeous woman, and they're like, why is she with him? She should be with someone like me. And that's kind of where it started for me too. I'm like, why aren't you just happy for that person? Be like, you go, Dave, like, good for you. Like, just be happy for other people, and be, you know, gym talk, because, you know, Holly and I go to the gym a lot. I like being a hype bro for people, or, you know, like a hype sis for people, where you're just like, oh yeah, I'm there for you. Like, and that's what the other thing I really like about it too, it allows me to have more diverse friendships. And I feel like there is a serious lack in not only our culture, but a lot of societies and cultures where across genders, when we become adults, we're so afraid to have friendships with other people because it might lead into something else, and there's always that insecurity or worry, you know, where I can have male friends of any sexual orientation. There's not issues with that, and I feel like for me, just having those connections with people, whatever it may be, has been so valuable, and that's where I wish there was more of that, you know, like. But it just going back, if it was like traditional, and let's say we were together and you're like, hey, I'm going to hang out with my friend Dave. I know traditional me, if I was monogamous, I would be like, who is this Dave guy? Like, I don't want you hanging out with him. I would like have an issue with it. But now, and this is something you can just evolve to, even in a monogamous relationship, and just say, yeah, it's totally fine, you have friends, you know, like. But I just see that a lot, especially out here with my monogamous friends, that they don't let their partners really really have a lot of friends, and that's where it's sliding more to control. And it becomes it's more toxic in a relationship, and it causes issues. Whereas if you lean more towards, commitment and independence, you promote independence for the person you're with. You support and promote their other connections, friendships, their passions. Like, you don't feel threatened by it. I feel like we're kind of taught to be threatened by those things, and but once you get past that, you just feel like you have a lot better friendships or romantic connections with people, because you can help support them in being their true selves and finding joy. So.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like that really opens up my mind too, even because I feel like if I'm being completely like vulnerable, and I've really struggled with jealousy in relationships, but also feeling threatened whenever my partner would have other close friends, especially if they were like women. And the reason I think that I felt that was, for one reason, the way that I was raised, because polygamy was allowed. And so I think I always had this idea or thing in my head that was like, men are always looking for another wife. Men are always looking for other women, and they're not trying to like actually be here for me. And I think a lot of it also comes down to a lack mindset, where we think that if we, if this person that's loving us starts to love someone else, we're going to get less love, or we're going to get less of them. And I can say that's where my mindset was at in a lot of situations, was like, well, if this person that I love, or this person that I'm in a relationship with, if they have multiple partners, or if they have multiple people in their life that they're giving attention and time to, that means that there's going to be less for me. And I don't think that has to be that way. I think that if you learn to love yourself, and you're learning to, take care of yourself, you kind of don't even need that type of like support and love from other people. It doesn't mean that it's not going to happen, but I think that when you release the codependency on someone else, you have a lot more people that actually want to show up for you and want to support you. And I'm happy that you shared, the whole thing about being happy for someone else's success, because that's also another thing I've also struggled with, just because of this belief, once again, that if someone else has that, then there's going to either be less for me, less success for me, or that means that I'm lesser because they have it and I don't. And it just goes back to that. It's all like limiting belief systems that we really have to like uncover, let go of, if we really want to move forward and actually be happy. And I think that's so cool that you're able to get to that point, because you're just so far ahead of the game in terms of being able to be more open-minded and caring and loving toward other people without this projecting your own like insecurities or fear on other people. And that's like really cool. And I like that you also brought up control. Like, the more that we tell the person that we're with, or our friends or our lovers or whoever it is, family, that they need to be doing this thing that we think they should be doing, and less supporting them in what they want to do, that's control, and that's not freedom. And I always equate love to freedom, not love to control. Control is always a fear-based thing. Mm-hmm. And on the spectrum of love and fear, I always like check myself and say, am I moving more in the direction of love, self-love and love for others, or am I moving more in a place of control and lack and fear? And I can see how it doesn't mean that monogamous relationships are based on fear, but I do think that if you are in a relationship with someone and you're being super controlling, saying that they can't have friends, or they, you don't support certain things that they enjoy or their passions, maybe check yourself and be like, wait, why don't I support them? Why don't I show up for them? Why am I not their best cheerleader? Because that's not coming from a loving place. Someone who really loves themselves and loves you, like KRATOS just said, would be your best cheerleader, would be like, I support you 100%. I want, whatever makes you happy makes me happy. And that's genuine, like, unconditional love. And anytime that we don't show up that way, it's probably something that we need to look at within ourselves and be like, why is this making me feel like I need to control? Or why is this making me feel like I'm going to have less because someone else has more? And this has been a huge thing in my life, because, once again, I think that a lot of what we're raised around, culturally what we're taught is to be controlling. And they kind of feed us this false idea of what love looks like, when love isn't codependency, love isn't controlling, love is freedom, and love is, in my eyes, like interdependence, where we are, loving, self-loving, and dependent upon ourselves, and then we allow other people to come into our life and support us, but we don't feel like we're going to die, or like we need someone else to love us or show up for us.
Yeah, no, and I mean, you hit on some points too I really like that I agree with also, and I also feel like for a lot of people, once again, these things they're just indoctrinated in your mind. So does it take a little bit to step back, unpack it, and realize, why am I thinking this? Where is this coming from? And even if you go back, like at the beginning when you said, even if you decide, you try different things and you want to be this, the great thing about that, now you're doing it because you want to, not because everybody's told you your whole life you should be this way. You're like, well, now I'm the captain of my own domain. I'm going to find my own happiness. I know I'm doing this because of me and not because I've been raised this way or everyone else is telling me this. And then the other thing too with those insecurities when people are with someone else, I mean, we are really taught that there's this, I like to call it a starvation economy, right? So there's a finite supply of love, of affection, yep. And you can only get that from one person, and regardless of your relationship dynamic, that's just not true, and it's not a starvation economy. You can have an abundant, if infinite amount of love for people, for your partner, and you should never try to control that. That's where it's toxic, and yep. Yeah, that control really, fear-based, like you said, from people's own insecurities, really ruins a lot of relationships because of that. Yeah, no, that definitely agree with that too.
Yeah.
So
it's such a cool thing to be able to go into, and it shows me, like, in your situation, how much you've been willing to go into your own belief systems and into your own psyche, and really question the things that you were raised with, the belief systems and the programming that you were given. Because, like he said too, something that's so valuable is, are you really living the life that you want? Or are you living a life based on fear and running from insecurities, or even just living a life that was programmed into you by your family, by society, and by, the economy or the government or whatever, like these hierarchical systems that we kind of look up to these people and say, well, if so-and-so says this, or this person says this who's in power, they must be right, or this must be the right way to do things or to live my life, when really, I don't think there's any right or wrong way to live your life. I mean, as long as you're doing something that's good for you, that isn't hurting or harming yourself or someone else, you should be able to do whatever you choose, or whatever brings you happiness and joy. But how are you really going to know what really brings you happiness and joy if you haven't done the work on yourself to remove the things that aren't even you? Because your programming and a lot of these insecurities, that isn't really who you are. It's just something that may have been passed down via generational trauma from your family, something that they believed. But a lot of these belief systems that are carried down from generation to generation were strictly for survival. And we're moving to this place where we're learning to thrive and be happy. And so there is a different energy from being in this place of, I want to be happy and free and thrive, versus I'm moving from fear and I'm running from all my traumas and I'm just doing this because so-and-so said I need to do it. So these are very, very big asks of, even just from this podcast, is maybe even take some time to sit down with yourself and ask yourself, am I really living a life that is in alignment with what I believe, that's in alignment with what makes me happy, that's in alignment with what I believe is true about myself and about life? And ultimately, what I believe we came down here for is to be happy and live a life that's truly fulfilling. And through living a life that's fulfilling to us, that makes us happy, that brings us joy, and that allows us to love ourselves and to love others, we get to evolve. The evolutionary process is like natural. As we move toward our passions and move toward what lights us up inside, we're naturally going to evolve and heal and just live a joyful life. So, is there anything else that you want to touch on, like, before we close out?
No, I mean, once again, I think everybody's different, exploring, doing what's best for you, promoting other people's independence, because I look at myself, I decided initially I want to feel morally okay about myself, and I'm like, how do I do that? How can I be a positive influence for others? And being a positive influence for myself and others, it's really been unpacking a lot of things and supporting people who have different belief systems, and being a high bro for them and saying, yeah, go have fun. I love it, and I love making friendships and connections and other things too. And thank you so much. Like, I enjoy our conversations, and it's always edifying to get other people's perspectives who've had, different struggles, trials. They grew up different backgrounds, different, like someone who's female who grew up in the community you did, compared to like my life and where I've come from. Like, your perspective and approach to life it's so valuable and like edifying, and I'm just happy that I'm able to hear some of that. So I appreciate you sharing with us and with myself and everyone else.
Yeah, thank you.
And inviting me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate you taking the time to also share and be vulnerable too, It's very, I think, kind of uncommon. It doesn't have to be this way, and I'm sure it will change, but it's not as common for men to be vulnerable and to show that side of themselves, and also to face their insecurities. So I applaud you for that, because I think that is something that's really amazing. And through your example, you're showing and giving permission to other men and other people, men and women, to really like do things that make them happy, but also to learn to love in a different way. And I think that's really profound, because changing perspective really can change someone's life. So like you said, everyone has a different background, and so it's really cool. I also love to hear from other people, so thanks for being on my podcast today. But yeah, I think that's pretty much closing out this podcast. Like, I feel like we touched on a lot of really good points, and if you guys have anything that you want to add to this conversation, you guys are so welcome to comment below and let us know your thoughts. And if you guys want to see KRATOS back for another podcast, then you can let me know in the comments as well. As always, if you give this video a like, it supports the channel a lot, pushes it out to the algorithm, so more people can see this. If you know someone in your life who could benefit from this podcast or from this video, please send it to them, because I love to be able to support people and, be a voice that maybe someone out there needs to hear. So anyways, that's it for this episode, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.